Cain is one of the most intriguing and dark characters in the Bible. Known for committing humanity's first murder, he not only bore the mark of the divine curse, but also became the founder of the first city. However, there is a mystery that has challenged scholars and readers for centuries. Who was his wife? The Bible mentions that Cain had children and offspring that influenced ancient civilization, but it never explains where his wife came from. Had he married a sister, a close relative, or were there other human beings besides the direct descendants of Adam and Eve? This question raises debates that span history, ranging from theological explanations to surprising theories. The answer to this riddle may reveal hidden truths about the earliest days of humanity, and even challenge traditional interpretations of Scripture. After all, if Cain found a wife, where did she come from? Were there other people? Would God have created more humans besides Adam and Eve? Get ready to delve into one of the Bible's greatest mysteries. Let's explore what the Scriptures reveal, and what they silently hide, about Cain's wife, the lineage he started, and the impact his offspring had on the world. The truth may be more surprising than you imagine. Cain's story does not end with the murder of Abel. After being cursed by God, he leaves for an unknown land and mysteriously finds a wife. But where did it come from? If Adam and Eve were the first humans created, how could there be another woman available to Cain? This is one of the greatest enigmas in the Bible and has generated countless theories over the centuries. Some believe that Cain's wife was his own sister or niece, while others suggest that God created more human beings besides Adam and Eve. This mystery leads us to question the extent to which the Bible reveals, or hides, certain events about the beginnings of humanity. If we consider the possibility that Cain married a sister, we are faced with a moral dilemma. After all, later, the Bible condemns marriages between close relatives. However, at the beginning of humanity, the need to perpetuate the species could justify such unions. If this is the answer, it would mean that humanity began with an extremely pure lineage, without the genetic problems we know today. But is this the most plausible explanation? Some scholars suggest that the Bible does not mention all divine creations, leaving room for the existence of other human groups. Another intriguing hypothesis comes from ancient Jewish traditions, such as the apocryphal book of Jasher, which mentions that Cain married his sister Awan. This theory gains strength when we realize that the Bible often focuses only on central characters, omitting details about other figures that could have existed. If this is the case, Cain's wife would not be a mystery, but just a piece not directly mentioned in the biblical narrative. On the other hand, this lack of information may also indicate something even deeper. Were there other peoples besides Adam's descendants? The idea that other human lineages coexisted with Cain may seem bold, but it is not ruled out by some theological currents. After all, upon being cursed, Cain fears that anyone who finds him could kill him. But if only the family of Adam and Eve existed, who exactly was Cain running from? This detail raises the hypothesis that God created other humans separately, or that other lineages developed independently. If this theory is correct, the pre-flood world may have been much more complex than we imagine. Regardless of the answer, the story of Cain's wife shows us how much there is still to discover about the first chapters of humanity. What seemed to be a simple account of a wedding turns into an enigma that challenges our understanding of the origins of civilization. But this is just the beginning of Cain's journey, and the secrets of his lineage go far beyond his mysterious wife. The story of Cain and Abel is one of the most impactful stories in the Bible. Two brothers, children of Adam and Eve, with opposite destinies. Abel was a shepherd, while Cain cultivated the land. When both presented offerings to God, only Abel's was accepted, awakening in Cain a corrosive feeling of envy and revolt. How could God favor his brother while he himself was rejected? This resentment grew until it turned into something even darker, humanity's first murder. The scene is brutal. Cain lures Abel into the field, out of sight, and kills him. What should be a simple outburst of frustration becomes an unprecedented crime. There were no police, laws, or trials back then. But God intervenes, asking Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" Cain, trying to hide his sin, responds with the famous phrase, "Am I my brother's keeper?" But the voice of Abel's blood cries out from the earth, and God declares his sentence. Cain is cursed. The land, which once bore him fruit, now refuses to produce for him. Your destiny is to wander like a wanderer, without home, without peace. It's a terrible punishment for someone who depended on the land to survive. But Cain fears something even worse, being killed by others. This detail awakens a new mystery. Who are these people who could have wanted her dead? The answer to this question could completely change the traditional view of the earliest times of humanity. God, surprisingly, does not condemn Cain to death. Instead, he places a protective sign on him, preventing anyone from killing him. But why? What would justify this mercy? Would it be an act of divine justice, or a second chance for Cain to prove his worth? Some see this protection as a reflection of God's grace, which even in the face of sin, offers redemption. Others, however, see this act as a shadow of what was to come, the emergence of a lineage marked by violence and rebellion. Abel's murder was not just an isolated crime. He triggered a succession of events that would shape the future of humanity. Cain, now cursed, would leave for a new territory, taking with him not only his guilt, but also the legacy of his descendants. What seemed like the end of his story was actually just the beginning of something much bigger. Despite the curse that condemned him to wander aimlessly, Cain made an unexpected decision: to build a city. This may seem contradictory for someone sentenced to be a wanderer, but perhaps this was his attempt to defy his own fate. The Bible mentions that he founded the city of Enoch, named after his son. But how could one man alone build a city? This suggests that Cain already had followers, or that, in some way, other human groups coexisted with the descendants of Adam and Eve. The founding of the city of Enoch raises several questions. Did Cain seek security? As a fugitive, he feared being killed, and a city could serve as a fortress against potential enemies. Or did he want to establish a new beginning, a place where his curse would be forgotten? Be that as it may, his initiative shows that despite divine punishment, he still possessed impressive abilities and ambitions. Instead of giving in to despair, Cain chose to create. Interestingly, Cain may have been one of civilization's first visionaries. In a world where humans lived in scattered groups, he took the first step towards social organization. A city meant more than just housing. It required rules, collective work, and possibly the first political structure. Its foundation suggests that Cain's descendants were the first to experiment with the idea of urban society, something revolutionary for the time. But would this city have been a refuge or a symbol of rebellion? If God had condemned him to be a wanderer, building a city could be interpreted as an act of defiance. Perhaps Cain was trying to prove that he could rewrite his destiny, that it would not be defined by the mark he bore. This attitude reflects a pattern that would be repeated throughout history. The human attempt to defy the limits imposed by the divine, as would later occur in the construction of the Tower of Babel. Enoch, the city of Cain, was the first major urban center mentioned in the Bible, but its history has been lost to time. We don't know how long it lasted, nor what its structure was like, but its impact was immense. She began a bloodline that would not only dominate the earth, but also profoundly influence the culture, technology, and eventually corruption of humanity. The city that was born from the need for protection and innovation would soon become the stage for a new type of challenge, the rise of a lineage that would leave its mark on history. Cain not only survived his curse, he gave rise to a bloodline that would change the course of humanity. Their descendants were pioneers in areas fundamental to civilization, such as metallurgy, music, and the domestication of animals. This means that, despite his condemnation, his heritage went beyond blood and became a cultural and technological landmark. But did this lineage only bring progress, or did it also carry the shadow of Cain's rebellion? Among the most notable names of his offspring is Jabal, known as the father of those who dwell in tents and keep cattle. He was responsible for advancing animal husbandry, something essential for the survival and organization of the first societies. His brother Jubal was a music pioneer, mastering instruments such as harps and flutes. Imagine this: in a still young world, without writing or large buildings, art, rhythm, and melody already existed. Cain's descendants were the first to transform the environment into something beyond mere survival. Another great name in this lineage was Tubal-Cain, the master of metallurgy. He mastered the use of bronze and iron, revolutionizing tools and weapons. This innovation changed everything. With metallurgy, agriculture became more efficient, construction more durable, and warfare more lethal. What began as an advance became a weapon of power and destruction. Was this knowledge a gift to humanity, or yet another sign of the dark influence of Cain's lineage? Despite these achievements, Cain's lineage never completely separated itself from its violent origins. Lamech, one of his best-known descendants, openly declared that he had killed a man and, instead of fearing God's punishment, claimed that his revenge would be even greater than Cain's. This shows that, even after generations, the mark of Cain was not just a visible sign. It was ingrained in their culture, their customs, and their worldview. The civilization he initiated not only brought progress, but also carried the seeds of conflict. Cain's legacy is a story of advances and shadows. He founded the first city, his children and grandchildren transformed society, and his innovations shaped the future. But at the same time, his lineage also carried a tendency towards pride, revenge, and the use of knowledge for power. What began with a wandering and cursed man became an empire of great deeds and unpredictable consequences. But how far could this lineage go before corruption took over completely? Cain's lineage not only advanced in knowledge and technology, it also inherited its brand of violence. The greatest example of this was Lamech, one of his most notable descendants. While Cain tried to hide his crime, Lamech did the opposite. He openly declared that he had killed a man and even boasted about it. He told his wives that if Cain was avenged 7 times, he would be avenged 70 times 7. This statement shows a brutal change in the mentality of Cain's descendants. Violence was no longer a mistake, but a right. Lamech represents the height of the corruption of this lineage. He was the first man recorded in the Bible to have more than one wife, something that would become common in subsequent generations. His quest for power and dominance over others marked a turning point. What was once just survival has turned into a culture of domination. If Cain killed out of envy, Lamech killed out of arrogance, showing that his ancestors' curse not only remained, but also evolved into something even darker. The society that descended from Cain began to divide between those who sought knowledge and those who used that knowledge to strengthen their own superiority. Metallurgy, for example, which could have been an advance for agriculture and construction, soon became a tool for making weapons. Music, which could have been a means of worship and culture, also became a symbol of ostentation and power. Everything that Cain's lineage created was, in some way, tainted by its origin. Over time, the violence spread. The Bible does not mention how many people lived at that time, but there is evidence that the pre-flood world became a chaotic place where sin and corruption grew without limit. If before God had protected Cain with a sign, now his descendants seemed to go too far. To what extent would the Creator support a humanity that strayed further and further from his ways? The story of Cain and his descendants is a warning. Uncontrolled knowledge can lead to destruction. The search for progress, without morality, can become a path of no return. The lineage that began with a man marked by the curse would soon become one of the main reasons for God to make a drastic decision. The world was on the brink of an event that would change everything forever. The corruption and violence of Cain's lineage did not go unanswered. As generations passed, humanity sank deeper and deeper into sin. The world that began with a family chosen by God was now filled with injustice, bloodshed, and rebellion. It wasn't just Cain's offspring who followed this path. Evil had spread far and wide. The Bible describes this period as a time when the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every thought of his heart was continually evil. Faced with this, God made a radical decision to destroy almost all of humanity with a great flood. Imagine the scenario. A civilization that had thrived in knowledge, technology, and culture was now about to be erased from history. Cities grew, Cain's descendants mastered the arts and science, but morality was abandoned. The world had become a reflection of its origin, marked by sin, pride, and the thirst for power. The violence that began with Cain had reached its peak. Now, the only solution would be a fresh start, but not all would be destroyed. Among all that corrupted generation, one man found grace before God, Noah. Unlike Cain's descendants, Noah came from the lineage of Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. His story represented a second chance for humanity, a new beginning after chaos. While Cain's sons sought power and domination, Noah lived in obedience and justice. God chose him to build the ark, the only hope of survival for creation. The flood was more than a catastrophe. It was a response to the moral destruction of humanity. Cain's descendants, who had built the first cities, developed metallurgy and music, were now carried away by the waters. All that was left was Noah and his family, ready to begin a new era. But had evil really been eliminated? Or would Cain's dark legacy somehow still live on? The story of Cain and his descendants teaches us that knowledge and progress, without values, can lead to destruction. His legacy was one of humanity's most remarkable, but also one of its most dangerous. The flood brought a new beginning, but it did not completely erase the consequences of original sin. After all, the mark of Cain was not just a visible sign. It was engraved in the hearts of humanity, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The story of Cain and his descendants is one of the most intriguing in the Bible. From humanity's first murder to the founding of the first city, your bloodline has left a profound impact on civilization. They were pioneers in music, metallurgy, and cattle breeding, but they also carried a legacy of violence and rebellion that culminated in the flood. What seemed like an advance ended up becoming one of the reasons for the destruction of humanity. But what does this story teach us? Are we destined to repeat the mistakes of the past? The quest for power, knowledge, and progress without morality remains a dilemma to this day. Civilization may have changed, but the challenges remain the same. Cain's legacy is still reflected in many aspects of modern society, in the thirst for domination, corruption, and lack of values we see around us. Given this, the question arises, which path should we follow? Cain's story warns us about the dangers of ignoring the consequences of our choices. But it also shows us that there is always the possibility of redemption. Noah found favor with God and began a new era for humanity. This means that regardless of past mistakes, there is always a chance to start over. Now, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that Cain's legacy really disappeared with the flood, or does it still live on in human attitudes? Leave your comment and share your reflections. If you like this content and want to continue exploring the mysteries of the Bible, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There are many other secrets and surprising stories that we will still discover together.